Hey guys, back. This is part two of your Greek theater worksheet number two. That is. Next on your worksheet, you're going to see conventions. These are different principles that were carried out through the plays. Number one, they were told in real time. It unfolds as it does in real life. There were real discoveries. All the action occurs within 24 hours. And the important thing about it happening within 24 hours is that when you have a tragedy, things happen quickly. You have a very quick fall from grace, which makes it even more tragic. Think about if you had everything you have now, it was all gone in 24 hours. That's pretty tragic. That's pretty dramatic. Number two, there was a universal stage. There were no scene changes. The stage stayed the same. And like I said, no scene changes, so nothing was revolving or anything like that. They would tell you where the action was taking place. Zero scene changes. Number three, there was an all-male theater once again. No women on stage, no women in the audience, just men on stage and in the audience. You had three main actors. We talked about this being a competition, and they only had three actors who could speak while they were on stage. So you had to kind of figure out how they're going to get them on stage and how you can keep the action going just like that. So you never had more than four people who were talking on stage at the same time. One of the constraints of that. Masks. You had they had to wear masks, and there were three reasons that they used masks. There were rapid changes. If you had different people playing different characters, you had to do it quickly. So they would switch it like that. You had men playing women, and then also they had to capture and emphasize the emotions that the characters were going through. And these theaters were huge. They would seat like 17,000 people, so they had to be big and show these effects. They were usually made of linen and cork, and also, since it was outdoors, they had to amplify the voice, and the mask helped amplify that voice. Number six is the chorus and the chorigo, the leader of the chorus, and then also the same functions of the chorus, the five that we went over last time. Formal language. These plays were written in a formal language because they were for the gods. And you wouldn't talk to, the gods the same way that you talk to your friends. You don't talk to your grandmother the same way that you talk to your friends, right? You usually, clean up your language a little bit because you want to make sure that you're being respectful. And the Greeks did the same thing with their plays. They made sure that they were speaking effectively and formally to the authorities, who were the gods. Once again, it was for the gods. It was an offering. It was an offering at the city Dionysia for the festival to honor Dionysus. All the violence was done off stage. This is number 9. Violence was done off stage. Once again, as not to offend the gods. And you're thinking, that's a really boring play. How do we get around that? Well, you have a character who you never see people fighting on stage in Greek theater. They usually fight off stage, and then somebody comes running in and goes, whew, man, you won't believe what I just saw. Oedipus was doing this and that, and then he got mad. That's probably a bad example to use because you have to read that. But something happens off stage. Here you go. In the play Phaedra, he gets, they can't show this on stage. He gets pulled by a chariot this way. They tie a rope around his leg and they pull it this way. Another chariot tied around his leg and pulls it that way. And his body is destroyed, but they couldn't show that on stage. It was very difficult to do, but they can tell you all about it. So there was no violence on stage in Greek theater, but they told you all about it, all the gory details. And then number 10, you had two pure forms, comedy and tragedy, or tragedy and comedy, whichever way you want to slice it. And tragedy happened to the kings and queens, to the royalty, because that, once again, was a bigger fall from grace. Comedy, they had no problem making fun of the base people. We don't want to insult, the well-to-do, so we will make fun of the lower class peoples there. Does that make sense? All right, let's see what else we got. I'm trucking right through this, so this is another reason why it's better for you to read it on your own, and I just drive it home. We have surviving playwrights. We have Aeschylus. Aeschylus is known for writing the Oresteia. Agamemnon, one of the plays. The Oresteia is the trilogy as well. Aeschylus is known for his heroic figures wrestling philosophical issues. If you think Oedipus has a twisted family tree, and he does, read Agamemnon. Holy mackerel. But once again, Aeschylus is known for heroic figures wrestling philosophical issues. Next, we have Sophocles. Sophocles wrote Oedipus Rex, he wrote Oedipus at Colonus, and he wrote Antigone. And that just kind of follows that family. Sophocles is known for his masterful dramatic structure. He was incredible at it, and after him, everybody kind of followed what he did. Next, you have Euripides. Euripides was a troublemaker. He wrote Medea, not the Medea that Tyler Perry, but on a side note, Tyler Perry actually took the name Medea from Euripides' Medea because you don't want to mess with that woman. So Euripides wrote Medea. He also wrote the Bacchae. And Euripides was known for questioning Athenian beliefs, and he suggested, Euripides did, he suggested that the gods were corrupt. So, but wonderful playwrights. I believe Aeschylus and Sophocles ended up overlapping just a little bit in time, and then a number of years after Sophocles died, Euripides came along. But if you have any questions about that, once again, shoot me an email, give me a phone call, and I'll be happy to answer these questions for you. We're going to move right on into surviving playwright. And comedy, we're talking about Aristophanes. Aristophanes wrote Lysistrata, which is a great anti-war play. It's a comedy, very, very, very quickly. Lysistrata is the story of during the Trojan War. The Greeks and the Trojans were still fighting each other. And the women in Greece were getting fed up because their men would come home for a week and then they'd be off to fight a battle for 2 months, and then they come back. And it was just crazy. And they wanted to end the war. So Lysistrata said, hey, I know we can do this. We're going to have all the women, when the men come home, go on a sex strike. There's no sex for anybody when the men come home. We can end this war. And here's the funny thing. They got together with the Trojan women and they said, we're going on a sex strike. How about you guys? Because things are bad over here in Greece. How are things over there in Troy? And the Trojan women said, things are horrible over here as well. So the Trojan women joined the Greek women in a sex strike. And eventually, long story short, they ended the war because the men came home and said, what are you talking about? We're not going to have sex. And they said, nope, you can't do it until you call off the war. So they called off the war. It's funny because that was written over 2,000 years ago. And I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing, if that were to happen today, you might be able to end a war that way. But anyway, we'll get moving right along here. We also have satyr plays during this time. Then we have one surviving satyr play, and that is the Cyclops, written by the troublemaker Euripides. Satyrs were half man, half goats, and they had a large phallus. A large phallus on stage because it was funny. So they would incorporate these satyr plays. You'd have the 3 tragedies, followed by the satyr play, so that the audience would not go home and kill themselves or be that upset because they saw something funny at the end of the day. The satyr plays were lewd and crude. Anything done that would make somebody laugh, usually sexual in nature. Hey, you know what? Don't get mad at me. I'm just reporting this information to you. Okay? But they were incorporated to send the audience home on a happy note. We talk about the structure of tragedy. You have the prologue, and this is in your book as well. It's devoted to exposition, lays it all out for you what's going on. The parados, which is the entry of the chorus. We have the episodes, which are the scenes of the play. Then you have the stasimas, which are the choralodes. You have the strophe and the antistrophe, and these occur within the stasimas. And then you have the exodus, which is the final scene. Okay? And that's all tragedy. Comedy, you've got the prologue, and in a comedy you have the introduction of the happy idea. So in Lysistrata, the happy idea would be, let's go on a sex strike. Okay? You have the parabasis. It looks like parabasis, but it's pronounced parabasis. And the parabasis is a direct address to the audience. You say, hey, this is what's going on, and this is what we're going to do about it. Followed by the scenes. Once again, the episodes are the scenes. Followed by the stasimas. Once again, the choralodes. Then we have the agon. The agon, which is the debate of the happy idea. In Lysistrata, you have the men who come home and they say, time out. We need to discuss this, honey. You know what I'm saying? I've been off fighting a war for 2 months, and now I come home. I haven't seen you in a while. This would be nice. And the women say, no, 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 no. No loving until you break up the war. And they have the debate of the happy idea. Then we have what's called the komos. It's the final scene, which is in a comedy. The final scene is called the komos, which is an exit to feasting and revelry. So everybody lives happily ever after in a comedy. Okay? Once again, if I said anything, if I'm moving too quickly, shoot me an email, give me a phone call. But this is all found in your book as well. Very quickly, we'll wrap this up. We have the performance space. It's outdoors, well, because they didn't have electricity back then. Daytime only, absolutely. It was built into a natural setting, usually into the side of a mountain, and then you had like the seating on the mountain and people looking out. Your stage was down here and right there, and then behind them was a beautiful landscape. So the people sitting over here could see the picture, and then, just gorgeous, wonderful natural setting. They had a skine hut, or a skine house. It was the backdrop for all of the action. It stayed the same throughout the play. It was usually 75 feet to 100 feet wide, and this was the setting for the structure. You have the orchestra, which is a circle in front of the skine hut, and this was the dancing place. The orchestra means dancing place. It has nothing to do with musicians in Greek theater. It was the dancing place. You have the paradoi. Paradoi are the aisles, the spaces at either side of the orchestra, which were used for entrances and exits. We have an altar also in the middle of the orchestra, and this was used for sacrifices and stuff like that, because once again, it was a sacrifice to the god Dionysus, sometimes Apollo, sometimes Zeus, and they would do the sacrifices right there on the altar and offer them up. They incorporated a machine called the Deus Ex Machina, which literally means God of the machine. And it was this crane-like device that they would tie an actor to. So here's the crane, and then on a rope, and then you had an actor right here dangling, and it would swing in the actor playing a god. And it was in full sight of the audience because the Greeks didn't want the gods to think that they were trying to get anything over on them. So they would show them, hey, you know what, this is an actor playing a god. It's not really Apollo. It's not really Dionysus. It's somebody playing that role. They would come in, resolve all the issues on the stage, and then they tug themselves up, and then the crane would bring them right back out. And now we have in literature the Deus Ex Machina effect, where everything seems to be in total disarray until the very, very end, where somebody comes in, rights all the wrongs, tugs on the rope, and then they're taken out. A beautiful piece of machinery. I love the word ekiklima right there at the bottom of your worksheet. Ekiklima was a wheeled platform used to bring in the dead or strewn bodies. As we talked about earlier, you couldn't show that stuff on stage, but they can open a door and bring out a platform that wheeled in and had a dead body on it, all those strewn pieces of the person who was pulled apart. They could show that to you, but they couldn't show you it happening. So that was the ekiklima, which was a wheeled platform used to bring in the dead or strewn bodies. I know I threw a ton of information at you, but hopefully this gets you, thinking about it. One last thing. The word tragedy comes from the word tragos. Tragos, literally translated, means goat song. Because when they were making sacrifices on the altar, they would bring in a baby goat, and they would usually slit the throat, and it sounded like a baby crying. So when you heard the song of the goat, that meant that there was a tragedy that was about to be performed. So tragos, literally translated, means goat song. That's all I've got. That's worksheet number 2. Once again, give me a phone call, shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thanks.